Hey, and welcome to This Is My Architecture. I'm Peter from AWS, and I'm joined by Matt from FINRA. Hey, Matt, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be here.
All right,
Appreciate
Matt.
it.
Just to get things started, tell us a bit about what FINRA does.
Sure. FINRA is the Financial Regulatory Authority. We're a non-for-profit, self-regulating organization. Our mission is to ensure market integrity and to protect investors. We oversee nearly all of the equities markets and the majority of the options markets today trading in the United States.
All right, and I know that you guys are running tons of different workloads on AWS, and one of them is here, but what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so the problem that we set out to solve years ago was we were at capacity. So what we were doing on premises, we saw that it was not going to keep up in terms of how much data we're bringing in. Just in October, we hit a new high watermark of 135 billion transactions or events in a single day.
Wow.
And so, and 5 years ago when we started, that number was half that. So this problem in particular is around user analytics. So giving users the ability to access the data like never before. And this, what I'm about to talk about, was not possible with our on-prem solution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, sounds really good. All right, so let's just go right into this and
Sure.
guide us through.
Sure. So there's a huge effort here around data management, and so what's going on is we bring in all this data, and there's a lot of ETL that happens here in terms of prepping that data for consumption for various reasons. So this is one usage scenario, which is analytics.
Got it.
And so what we learned very quickly was bringing in the data in the format, our gold source, that was not the data that we could really go against effectively, and realize some of the performance characteristics we were looking for. So we actually created a separate copy in S3. So we essentially did a data copy here for analytics and storing that in S3. So, and this is a multi-petabyte data lake for querying, okay? And so what goes on here is we'll have users in our market regulation department that they need to access the data. They get alerts. We run sweeps and we get tips and various things like that. So they'll need to access the data and ask questions of what's going on in the marketplace. So a user can come in and ask a question of our solution. This is FINRA's modern audit trail solution that replaced what we were doing on premises. So that request can come in and kick off basically a job to create what we call a data mart. So it's a subset of the data lake, essentially.
Understood.
So from this ECS cluster, so we'll have essentially, we'll kick off a Hive job in EMR. And so we'll spool up an EMR cluster, and we will access this data to basically pare down or get a subset of the data. And then what we'll do is we'll create that data mart.
All right.
In another S3 location. And so once that's done, then ECS, so that's step one. And then we have another step, step two, where we'll do introspection on this data to figure out what are we doing with it in terms of how are we going to serve it up so that the user can come back and then do interactive analytics on that data.
Got it. Just let me ask you one question before you get to the next stage. So what I see here is there's user-driven requests, right? So there's something going on in terms of logic here. There's decisions being made in terms of what kind of cluster, what kind of requests are being executed on that side. So what's the rule set that you make those decisions on?
Sure. So once we've actually constructed the data mart, so we actually look at a number of things. We look at how complex the question is. So we allow the users to interleave the data. We bring it in from firms, from exchanges, and the thing that we couldn't support in the past was allowing them to join any data set they wanted together. And we're letting them do that now. And so we look at how complex was that question in terms of how many objects are in the data set. And so the wider it is, the more complex it is. And then we also look at how many rows of data. So if they're asking, give me all trading for a very liquid stock for, say, an entire week, that's hundreds of millions of records potentially.
Sure.
So we look at row counts, columns, we're looking at row counts, we're looking at file size. And so once that's determined in terms of once it understands how complex the query is, how big it is, then it'll do some signaling. If it's a simple query where, let's say there's really no joins, then it will signal basically our Presto cluster
to make requests down here.
Right, to then pull the data. And if it's, let's say, a really complex query where we're joining a lot of data, then that's going to be a Redshift candidate. And so the signaling will go to Redshift, and then similarly, it will pull the data.
So, all right, understood. So there's a full-size flow. You do decide what kind of data is being pulled and copied from that almost golden storage here. And then once that's copied, there's another logical part that's triggered by users, I assume, right? In that logical part,
that's right.
Correct. And that logical part would create or invoke the creation of different clusters on that side that would do, that would pull data and read and analyze what's in here. What's the reason for having those different solutions on that side?
Yeah. So when we first went live, we actually didn't have Presto running in production because it was still maturing from a security perspective in terms of being able to operationalize that. We went in with basically one large 96-node Redshift cluster to deal with this. And what we found was with removing some of the limits of the past, we actually uncovered a lot more needs around some of the questions that they're asking. They were asking questions that were really, really large, where they want to understand what's going on with some of these trading algorithms at some of the bigger firms, to something very, very small.
Got it.
And what we found was Redshift was not the end-all be-all solution. It really helped us for certain querying scenarios, but not the small ones. And so that's when we kind of moved to a blend here of querying engines.
Understood. All right. So there's a strong reason for saying, okay, you either go for this way or you go for that way. And that reason comes from the decisions that are being made on this side, right?
Correct.
All right, Matt, so tell me how the users access all this.
Sure. So once all this is done, then the user can come back in at a later time, or if it's done in batch, it's already waiting for them. And they'll submit their request to essentially go ask questions of this subset of the data that they've requested and has been materialized for them. So a request will hit ECS, and then this will actually figure out, well, what are they looking for? Oh, they're looking for the data mart that they requested that we
guide it right there.
And it'll guide them right to Presto if it's a simpler query, a data mart, excuse me, or if it's a more complex data mart, then it'll send them to the appropriate Redshift cluster.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And thanks for watching This Is My Architecture.